Good morning, everybody. How are you,
Good morning and
everybody?
welcome
Welcome
to
to
this
this
new
new edition
edition of
of the emission. My name is
e-mission. My name
Gabriela
is Gabriela
Villalobos, and I
Villalobos, and it
have
is
the
my pleasure
pleasure
to
of being
accompany
with
you in
you
this new
in this
version
new 2021
2021
version
focused on
focused on
sustainability, a subject that,
sustainability,
as you well
an
know,
issue that has become
has
very
been
relevant and
significantly
also very
more relevant,
urgent.
and it's quite
So,
urgent.
like
That's
every
why
day,
every
we
day
have
we've
been
addressed
covering
different
sub
topics to go
themes
deep
on this,
into
which
our
has
topic,
become
which is
very
quite
relevant for
relevant
our
for our
sector.
sector. But
But
before
before
we
continuing and
continue
telling you
and we
what
start with this
this
emission of
is
the
going to
mission,
be about.
I'm very
Today,
well
I have
accompanied
on the
with
stage Carlos
Carlos
Bascu,
Vascun, National Council
Councillor of
of the
the
Chilean
Chilean Chamber
Chamber
of
of
Commerce.
Construction. How
Welcome,
are
Carlos.
you,
How are you?
Carlos? Welcome.
Well,
I am great, thank
it's a
you. It is
pleasure for me to
my
be here in this
pleasure to be
presentation on this
here of
important
this
mission
important
in
e-mission
matters of
for the
future
future of
of
construction
construction,
and
which is
sustainability.
sustainability.
We'll have a great session today, so
So
we have
we
a lot
have
to
a
talk
lot to
about
talk
in the
about in
next
the following
hours,
hours
with
with
great
great
guests as
guests,
well,
of
right?
course.
Now, as a
Now,
summary,
very
I'd like
quickly,
to
I want to tell
rapidly
you
tell
that
you that
last
last
week,
week
when
when
we
we
began this new
began with this
version
new version of
of
the e-mission, we had
this
two great sessions.
transmission,
We
we
had the
had
participation of
two previous
three
sessions. We had three
experts
great
where we
experts
addressed the
where we
importance of
covered the
being
importance
certified
of
in
to be
this matter.
certified on
That's
this
what the
matter
first version
and the
was
first
about,
version and the
and the
relevance
relevance of
of
integrating the
integrating
concept of
the
sustainability
sustainability
from the early
concept from the
stages,
early stages of a
which
project, which
was
was
the
what we
session we
had
had last
uh,
Friday. Now
on the last
today
session.
we'll focus
Today,
on
we're going
operation,
to
how
focus on
to operate and
operation,
how to
how to
execute
operate
in a
sustainably,
sustainable
how
manner.
this is
What does this
done,
mean, and
and a
how
lot
do we do
more.
this?
This is
We'll
what we're going to be
talk
talking about today.
much more
Before,
today. Before introducing our first speaker, that is connecting from the
before,
UK, we'd like to remind you that just like the prior sessions, we'll be
so we're going to
using the
use
platform Menti, and you know the instructions already, but just as a reminder for those of you that are just tuning in order to participate, it's
what's
critical to
fundamental.
enter to
You have to go into
menti.com and enter
menti.com and enter
the
the
code
code,
you see on screen, the code you're seeing at the bottom right now on your screens, and to follow the instructions of the platforms. We'd like to repeat that in order to have a great experience, it means we'll all be working and participating together. We'll have two lectures today, one in English and the other one in Spanish. And in the end, we'll have time to read all the questions that you send us and also the questions that arise here from the auditorium of the chamber. The moderation will be in English, but you can send us your questions either in English or Spanish, and we'll start channeling them. If you have a specific question for one of the speakers, I'd like
so
to
for any
recommend to
speaker,
put your name because there are many topics that will repeat. So we'll probably ask them to both speakers. Having said that, I'd like to leave you with the first lecture for today, directly from the UK. And in a remote manner, we have Gavin Westbrook, Senior Sustainability Manager from
who
Mace Group,
has
who has
a
prepared a
great
great
presentation
presentation.
prepared.
Welcome,
Welcome,
Gavin. Thank you
Gavin,
very
and
much for
thank you for
accompanying
being
us
with
today.
us today.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for having me here today. Just to present on some sustainability in construction. I have tried to change a few of the titles to Spanish, but please forgive my translations. I have been relying on some internet services for that. So I'm just going to do a quick run through of a little bit of induction of MACE and what we've been doing in terms of sustainability in construction. So we recently launched our new sustainability strategy for 2026. So we have the goals of pursuing a sustainable world, of growing together and delivering distinctive value. The one of particular relevance is pursuing a sustainable world. The goal is to accelerate the built environment's response to the climate emergency. And this all falls under our overall strategy of to redefine the boundaries of ambition. So we recently became a carbon neutral company in 2020. So we managed to reduce our embodied carbon emissions by half, and then we offset the balance of that. To build on that, we are targeting a 10% reduction year on year between now and 2026, which would be another 50% reduction. We recognize that as one company, we also have potential for a much larger impact in the industry as a whole through all our clients. So we have targeted a reduction of 1 million tons of carbon through all the projects we work on with our clients. And we also have a target of increasing biodiversity net gain by 500 hectares. So we do have a report as well, which is our Journey to Net Zero, our 1 year on report. I've sent it through as well, so that can be shared with you. All of these different aspects are increasingly being seen as value adds to all our clients and allows us to stand out in the industry, and that's providing a distinctive offer that allows us to win work that we might not otherwise have been offered or have won before. And just going to run through some of the details of things that we have been looking at and areas in which we see the industry moving. So, of course, why do we want to look at this? Well, in terms of global emissions, we need to obviously deal with the climate crisis, and we need to align construction to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. As part of that, recognizing that through building operations and the materials that go into our buildings, we're accounting for roughly 39% of all carbon emissions. So it's much larger than transportation or any other industry. On buildings, and building them and running them is what is emitting a really significant amount of emissions. We also produce about 38 billion tons of material and produce 35% of all landfill waste. So all these are a big challenge and something that we can rise to and really make a difference. So recognizing that we do have such a large impact overall, any improvements we make in our industry do have a very large impact overall as well. So we have a great potential to drive change and to make a difference. So in a number of instances, there's not just the international agreements and like the Paris Climate Agreement to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. There's, in many countries, there's also local legislation that's coming in as well, all around the world. Speaking specifically about the UK, we have the Climate Change Act that was brought in that has a whole range of strategies to get to net zero carbon before 2050 in line with the Paris Agreement. Now, this gets updated every few years. There's more targets, more information getting developed and getting put into place. But also it's crucial to remember that what's also coming through on a more local level is if you want to get planning approval for projects, it's becoming a requirement now that you have to do a full embodied carbon life cycle analysis for your project, or have at least had a look at your embodied carbon and taken measures to reduce it. So this is starting to become more relevant because if you can't get these, if you can't work on these sort of targets, then you can't even get your building plans approved. So the industry is moving, and it's far better to try and get ahead of all these different bits of legislation that are coming in and use it as a competitive advantage, as opposed to trying to catch up later down the road when all the changes have been made, and there's great potential then to start losing out to competitors. So one of the very big important aspects of overall sustainability when talking about construction is all our responsible procurement. So where are all our materials coming from? So it's trying to encourage local sourcing as much as possible to make sure that any products and materials that we do use have some sort of certification behind them, some sort of environmental standard. So you have FSC, which is a Forest Stewardship Council certification, which is ensuring that timber is sourced sustainably. You have ISO 14001 that applies in many industries. You have responsible sourcing on concrete, on steel. All those materials that we use heavily in construction are all becoming more regulated and are changing in terms of becoming more sustainable as well. Part of this is also looking at how the people involved in making those materials. So in the construction industry, it's been shown that we have a particular risk to having modern slavery in our procurement processes, either from the sourcing of the raw materials to the manufacturing of the products to even on sites. Sometimes this can happen. So trying to stamp out modern slavery and exploitation of workers is very important as well when considering where you're sourcing your materials from, because this obviously has a reputational risk and is something that we need to stamp out. One of the challenges along with sustainable materials is trying to find compliant products to be used in your products, in your projects. A lot of the time, manufacturers don't have these certifications or don't know about them. And this will also vary greatly from region to region, depending on what the local regulations are. So when dealing with more international projects, it's trying to learn what the local standards are and then trying to account for that in all our procurement processes. It sometimes can cost a little bit extra on materials, but it's well worth that peace of mind to make sure you're getting materials that are sustainable and that aren't going to cause you problems later down the road, in that they can also be taken back and be recycled and not just adding to the waste problem, which is going to become under tax scrutiny later on, or fines and fees like that for dealing with waste. One of the easiest things to do in any building or any construction project is to switch to a renewable power supply. So many of our sites now have switched over to using permanent power connections. Is whenever we can get that, we switch directly to a permanent connection and get a renewable energy supplier. And also trying to find alternatives for diesel on site. So construction industry use a fair amount of diesel, either in generators or other bits of plant and equipment. So one of the things we have done is to ban diesel generators from all of our sites. It's not always easy. Sometimes the alternatives aren't always up to standard yet, but we are slowly building up a database of clean technology, of all the plant and equipment that we like to try and use and try and encourage, because this all makes a difference on our sites. So I have a few examples here. So we've used hybrid excavators on a few projects. So they were a combination of hydrogen fuel cell and diesel. They saved roughly 480 liters of fuel a week. And the annual savings on that equipment was around £7,000 in terms of operating costs and rental costs on that equipment. So if you were to purchase the equipment, it is slightly more upfront, but there are definite savings in the operation of the equipment, also generating 20% less emissions. We've also used solar and wind CCTV systems and lighting systems on our site. So those have managed to get rid of diesel altogether in operation and also have a significant operations saving. On some of the airport projects, we've used the hybrid mobile elevating work platforms. They had an 18% saving in rental and fuel costs, and also emitted 50% lower emissions. So a lot of the equipment does have its advantages, especially when working in dense city centers. A lot of the cities now have restrictions on emissions and noise, and this equipment allows you to get around those because they are very quiet, being electrical or hydrogen powered, and they have hardly any or no emissions at all. So trying to talk a bit more about embodied carbon, we've been involved in a number of initiatives to try and reduce the embodied carbon that goes into our projects and into our materials. We're working with a number of different suppliers and trying to roll these out across different projects in all the regions we operate in. So we've been trying to pioneer and develop new high-rise solutions for building residential tower blocks and office blocks. These of trying to move it more from an on-site production process to a factory approach. So a lot of the materials are prefabricated, pre-made in modules off-site, then delivered to site and just hoisted and installed in place. By making it a factory process, we have up to 75% less waste, 40% less transport of materials to and from sites. We have a lighter structure. We have a 25% faster delivery time, and we also have fewer people on site. Now, one of the problems that we have specifically in the UK, and I'm not entirely aware, but you might have the same problem there, is that there's a shortage of new staff in the construction industry. Not that many people are joining the industry anymore. So we are running out of skilled people to be able to work on all our projects. So being more efficient with the people we do have is becoming really important. We're also working on a project with Chem-Free to develop a cement-free concrete product that would result in 88% lower carbon emissions, but still have all the same properties that we want out of our concrete products. Calpre is working on developing a new sort of earth-friendly concrete. There's much lower embodied carbon, uses many products like granulated blast furnace slag to reduce the amount of cement in the product and also uses geometric binders. There's also new exciting developments now in looking at graphene and adding that to concrete products to increase its strength and reduce the amount of carbon produced from it. A tool we've been using quite extensively lately is being One-Click LCA. It's an embodied carbon calculation software. It's online. It uses information from manufacturers and suppliers to try and track where all the embodied carbon on your project is coming from. It uses many of the international baselines, like from the World Green Building Council, to work this out and to try and drive that sustainability through the project and really identify where we can make changes to drop down the embodied carbon. One of the bits of software we're using now, also used on the reconstruction project in Peru now, is the Optimized program. This is an online platform that allows us to monitor the on-site performance of the project. So we can monitor many different sustainability metrics, including now also health and safety and quality, looking at energy emissions, transport, where the materials are coming from, the waste generated off the site, progression to any standards that are like green building standards that have been targeted. A lot of the green building standards now are also being updated to take into account the latest regulation changes. So those are also moving further on as well, and clients are increasingly asking for them. I have a brief overview here of part of the considerations when looking at embodied carbon in any new project. So as can be seen over the lifetime of the project, typically most of the carbon emissions come from the operation of the building. But as we get better in designing our structures, we have the low and zero carbon systems, we have better performing fabrics in our buildings, and also once we optimize all of our building systems and how we use it, this number for operational energy is going to keep coming down, which is why the focus has shifted onto the embodied carbon transport and the disposal of the building at the end of its life, and trying to make sure that we target that as well, because we're going to get to a point where operational energy is going to be a very small percentage of the overall carbon emissions, and we'll have to focus on the materials themselves. For existing structures, existing portfolios, it's very important to drive down your current footprint as far as possible, then switching over to more renewable sources, then dealing with how the behavior works in the building, designing for more flexible future workspaces. And then once everything else has been dealt with and you can't get any further, that's only when you look at the carbon offsetting. You don't want to start with that right at the beginning, because that'll end up being very expensive and also not hugely productive. Some examples of projects we have here in the UK, the Ministry of Justice is delivering a new prisons program. We've been involved in this as well, and we've done full carbon and life cycle analysis and design analysis on these projects. So we've helped to remove 279,000 tons of CO2 over the lifespan of the buildings. There's 10 gigawatt hours worth of energy saved through the design of the projects, and has resulted in a £56 million energy saving to the Ministry of Justice. The prisons are all going to be getting a BREEAM Outstanding certifications. So that's one of the green building certification we use here in the UK. And all have resulted in net gain in biodiversity and ecological value. Another example is the UCL New Student Centre, this university campus building. It secured a BREEAM Outstanding score. It reduced its body carbon just through the cement alone by 49%. And it made a huge difference in body carbon. It made a big difference through its BREEAM rating. And also is designed to be a passive building. So it needs almost no cooling or heating. And through those seasons, it's able to manage itself effectively enough that it has a well-insulated facade and fabric that still uses the natural heat energy you get from the sun during winter, but then keeps it out during summer. So try and manage your spaces. Okay, I hope I've kept the time there and haven't run too far over the allotted time slot. But just a brief overview of some of the things we're looking to try and drive in terms of sustainability in the construction sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gavin, for your presentation. We'll be back with you in a couple of minutes for the Q&A. Todos ustedes que han estado conectados también, les pido que...
To all of you that have been connected, I'd like to ask you for your questions for them, if they're specifically for Gavin, for you to enter them in the Menti platform. And we will continue here on the program for this third session of our e-mission, and we will now introduce our second lecturer. We would like to receive Miguel Salazar. He is the commercial director and founder in Quimenco Civil Engineering, with a long trajectory in administration of large construction projects in our country. Throughout his career, he has related with different startups, with companies who, through new technologies, work in the resolution and solving new problems and the challenges that the industry is facing now. He decided to work for the transformation of water management in Chile in the context of the water crisis that the country is living, which is a challenge. It's quite a challenging topic. And with no further ado, welcome, Miguel. The floor is yours. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'd like to thank you for the invitation and for the opportunity of being able to share this experience with all of you. I'll open my presentation. Yes, we can see it now. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation to this event. It's a very important topic. It has to do with the different issues that nowadays affect us at as a global and local level. My name is Miguel Salazar, and I'll share the experience of the UK and Quimenco in Chile regarding the water management efficiency for sustainable operations and construction and infrastructure. I'd like to start by telling you that my work experience in Chile is 100% related with construction, and I'm a civil structural engineer responsible for construction projects for more than 10 years. Along with other years of experience in transport and logistics, in 2018, I traveled to the UK to study a master's in innovation and entrepreneurship in the University of Nottingham, with the conviction that given these years of experience in the field, there's a high potential to broaden the intrinsic value of this through solutions that contribute to the efficiency of processes as a key factor for the future economic sustainability of the industry, new technologies and competitors that or disruptive agents and or collaborators based on the relationship that the participants of the field adopted in the face of these new participants in the market. In the context of the masters, I met the founder of Quensis, and we started with Quimenco in Chile to contribute to local market through complements that allowed working in a technical manner with time, and to link the management of resource as fundamental as water. Quenster started operating in the UK in 2015, looking to ensure a sustainable future for supplying clean water in the country through a technological and friendly solution based on a combination of hardware and software, both linked through IoT technology, known under the generic model of smart water management. The beginning, we aimed to retails, restaurants, distribution centers, among others. In them, the solution between a tool that let the managers of those sites an understanding on water consumption and daily operations and the early detection of losses, reaching a lot of savings in an economic manner and operations that are much more efficient. Here we can see some of the case studies with experience with different customers. For example, with Travis Perkins, similar to a home center, easy in Chile, we were able to detect there was 10,000 pounds per year saved from a leaking toilet, just from that. There's a distribution center that saved 10 million, a stadium for 94 million pesos, Chilean pesos. Also, a branch of a restaurant chain was reducing 50% of the infrastructure associated to a bus station, almost 50%. The solution supports management of resources through the detection of losses that are hidden to everyone that uses water in the daily operations. It's all the infrastructures that has personnel and staff for the respective it's worth noting that these infrastructures are relatively modern. And this is not due to this continuity of facilities. Even constructions that are just provided, they can have these deficiencies. With years, the growth of the application of this tool and the appearance of new industries that wanted to operate in a more sustainable manner and to solve issues in terms of water issues with a better administration of resources, brought the solution closer to the construction industry, specifically in projects that are in the construction phase. In this case, the tool is used for two purposes. One, it's the administration, the use of water in the construction phase for contractors and workers in temporary installations to have control of consumption and to ensure. And he also has commissioning, they also have commissioning, water commissioning customization. Specifically in this case, we have monitoring, we have the alert of losses, we have a remote closing of valves that allows us to manage better the commissioning phase, avoiding the loss of the resources, but avoiding damages to the infrastructure that's already built. This is a double benefit for the construction. The tool is part of the infrastructure when you provide it to the end customer. This is equipped to a water system, an intelligent water system as an added value, which will allow to efficiently operate the resource and to contain water loss in the operation of the infrastructure. This is a water disruption, and this contributes towards a smart building from the administration and management of the water networks.
This need in the industry of the United Kingdom begins with the data. Currently, the damage of the infrastructure represents a higher risk and more frequent than the existence of fires. 92% of construction will report water damage, which represents 193 billion pesos, and a leak occurs every 10 minutes. Also, the damage on water damage is 55 million of pesos, but they can exceed 1 billion depending on the damage. Now, if you have intelligent management systems, which is capable of measuring, detecting, and controlling, has 6 times less reports a year, going from 62 to 11%. The use of them confirms the multiple recognitions of this solution as an effective tool and tested tool for an efficient management of water resources in operation of infrastructure, which has saved more than 100 million liters of water, added to the economic savings of efficient use, which showed in the monthly charges and damages to infrastructure based on water loss. The implementation of this solution through Givenco is giving its first steps beginning this year with applications in commercial infrastructure similar to the road made in the United Kingdom and similar results in the degree of operational inefficiency on water consumption, which are above 50% in the first installations. Here we can see the result of the pilot test in Chile, where we can see based on the functionalities of the solution, like the real-time monitoring and machine learning algorithm that learns patterns of consumption and detects abnormal usage, the percentage of savings of a company, understanding their consumption and making correct decisions based on the data. This is the company of 11,700 square meters of infrastructure in Pudahuel, which acts as sells spare parts for automobiles. Now we can see the difference in consumption achieved with this monitoring that previously didn't exist. So all this inefficiency that you believe that do not exist are hidden from the daily operation, and there is a potential of 30,000 savings from 30,000 to 13,000 liters per day, or 6 million pesos per year. So now we are in the new infrastructure experience in construction phase, because we understand that there's a need to board the startup of the water networks due to loss of resources and material and economic damage that it causes, just like in the United Kingdom. And the first intelligent building in Chile, based on water consumption, and in the way that the project should be thought in the context of managing a key and scarce resource like water. The local reality has very specific matters, which shares a scenario with more potential of application, and on the other hand, barriers that slow their application. All this related with the potential that the industry has uh, for management of resources. We will see the main ones now. From those who theoretically should trigger a better implementation of this kind of tools, the main factor is the large water scarcity in Chile. Chile is drying up, which implies that there's a lower offer of the availability of the resource. So from the sixth region to the north, there is high and extreme hydric stress. So the demand is over 80% of the offer, and the closest scenario, optimistically looking, is that the situation will become more serious for other regions. We have 168 districts and more than 6 million people living in water scarcity. But although this decrease of scarcity uh, exists, they don't do anything to decrease the demand and increase the offer. So the only thing they do is carry water in trucks to where the water is scarce. And this is not a sustainable solution in time. Why? Because according to Fundación Chile and the hydric forecast 2030, water scarcity in 60% is due to bad resource management. So injecting water to an inefficient system implies wasting the hydraulic resource. This, in a country like Israel, with a report from the Chilean Senate on international success stories, this country and its experience shows that one of the main pillars and a priority to begin action on the matter is to measure the use and the water use and consumption in order to understand what is the resources used on, the losses and inefficiency, and with that base, manage it better. In this area, all the market angels are called to contribute from their industry to make the resource management more efficient, because it is a problem that will affect everyone in higher or lower measure. So this uh, journal, this newspaper headline, the resource is not enough for all the agents of the market, having a priority human consumption over industry. So this is why the section where this is in industry, not in environment, no new trends or sustainability as it used to be in the past. In this specific case of last week, so El Aromo Dam are not enough to ensure the supply for the fifth region. These are a clear call for all the industry, especially for those who define the infrastructures of the future, to begin to rethink the relationship with scarce resources and how these have an influence in our activity, generating economic savings, operating more efficiently, but on the other hand, something as fundamental as allowing us to operate, to conduct our economic activity, because the example is clear. With no water, the economy halts. 60% of the GDP of Chile depends on activities that use water to operate. But paradoxically, the resource that moves the economy of the country, and therefore our industry, is abandoned when a minimum amount of resources are destined to solutions that guarantee sustainability in time. And this damages the industry because they don't consider water efficiency in their projects. In 2016, the World Bank warned about the economic consequences of the lack of resource. maybe decreasing the consumption of the regions. Uh, and now, 5% after this warning, the current reality is knocking on the door, alerting the industry. And as the situation has been in these great predictions on climate change, the processes have begun earlier, and the impacts have also begun earlier. Now, the water shortage is a trigger for the implementation of tools that allow managing efficiently these resources. The understanding of the business as usual or traditional business does not generate profits with a 360-degree impact in sustainable policies. This is not a personal thing or a theoretical study. Today, it is the measured reality in the market at a world level that shows that a company that places sustainability in its core business is more profitable than a company that doesn't. Achieve this mentality change in the industry. It goes in the same line what was commented at the beginning of this presentation, where today it is in our hands to make the decisions that will allow guaranteeing economic sustainability of the area, understanding our business based on the trends of the industry and the new solutions that will allow us to carry out this update, or if not, we will be at the mercy of the eruption of other agents who understand this change in trend and begin operating under this model, taking us the profit margins until this is non-sustainable. In a summary, we identified three factors that should uh, bring the massification of this tool. One is water scarcity and the need to optimize its use. The other is understanding a new roadmap to follow to try to achieve a higher economic profitability and sustainability for the future. And a third factor, the particular needs of the industry due to damage caused by water leaks in the infrastructure. So this generates an efficient situation for the reason. Now, one is the entrance of resource management tools, in this case water, is the price of them in Santiago, for example. If we compare cities at a world level with the same level of hydric stress, we have a price of water per cubic meter 5 times cheaper, for example, like San Francisco in the United States. We talk a lot that desalination plants are the holy grail, but it doesn't address the cost to the market. In Tel Aviv, it is 3 times as expensive. And another data is that they only began to inject water from that source once they understood their consumptions and managed their inefficiencies. So in our case, without covering that, it would imply a higher price even. Today, the low price and the lack of understanding of the management of the resource for our activity are the fundamental factors that imply the difference between the use of the resource and the lack of attention to its inefficiency. And the reality in Chile is not as different as the cities around the world. There are cities in Chile where water costs double and triple than Santiago. So rate is not, so it's imminent to have tariff raises. You can see that the northern area in Santiago, the water costs the double as the other districts in Santiago. And these changes in rates were announced in September with the drought plan launched by the government. With 0.8 efficiency in cities. So we hope we don't arrive this to an increase in rates and to begin working in higher efficiency. Currently, the massification of a tool between important productive agents of the local ecosystem, that you see that only the direct expenditure on the resource is important. So it's not convenient to address said efficiencies, but we have to understand the social value of the resource as a driver of the economy, and ignoring any action in this area is a time bomb that hurts our activity. We're essentially shooting ourselves in the foot. So, for example, if one of the affluents supply Santiago, and given the priority for human use, concrete plants cannot use the water to produce. Or maybe a key supplier cannot deliver the product because they can't operate the facilities due to lack of workers, due to lack of water. So this is vitally important and to be considered. The experience in the United Kingdom and the pros and cons of the local market for a consolidation of the use of tools to manage efficiently the resource in constructions and operations. The question is how we can consolidate in one concept everything else. The concept is of resilient infrastructure. This is a report published last month, developed by the Global Center of Adaptation with the support of the Infrastructure and Water Management uh, Ministry of Holland. This water scarcity, in service interruptions, damage to infrastructure due to losses in similar situations tend to hurt the users and the companies. According to the World Bank, disruptions to the infrastructure from their broad significance and those especially caused by climate change cost $390 billion a year to users and companies. Investing in resilient infrastructure implies economic benefits of $4.2 trillion along the life cycles of that infrastructure. And this translates in $4 of profit for each dollar invested. Therefore, the resilient infrastructures is not higher cost, but better spending and more effective spending. All this added to the contribution in the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, where you can see all those that impact resilient infrastructure investments. We can see that we have 7 of the 17 goals established. With the previous and joining the concepts according to the application of the tool in the United Kingdom and Chile, according to the study cases, we must indicate that a resilient structure is characterized by 3 capacities. The first one is that it is capable of absorbing the disruptions and minimizing the consequences. An example of this are the seismic dissipators when facing an earthquake, by releasing that energy, or a smart water management system, which absorbs the operational structures of a breakage in a network. And this provides a recovery capacity of the infrastructure, which is the second capacity of this resilient structure, recovery and restoring. And the third capacity is adaptability, to adapt to unwanted events with changes. Examples go in the line of the flood areas, which adapt to take those roles when floods occur. This risk or disruption threat in the functionality of the infrastructure implies rethinking our design from the operational side to provide a product that is able to navigate successfully the different scenarios that are more visible and known. And with this, provide a space that provides a better quality of life and operation for the final customers. And the economic profit along the presentation shows that implementing a tool of this kind, 1 per floor in a 15-floor building or 15,000 square meters, represents an investment of only 0.2 of the total percent of the total cost of the project, being nothing compared to the direct benefit in the operation, commissioning, and startup, as the added value for the user and the surroundings where this project will be operated along its life cycle. Finally, and due to all what I said before, moving from the experience of usage of efficient management tools in the United Kingdom to the opportunity that is available in Chile now, their implementations to manage a scarce resource and a key resource for the economy is that the resilient infrastructure becomes a meeting point between sustainability and economic profit that will allow the industry to forecast a sustainable future in time, by which we are facing a great opportunity to begin thinking of our product and service under this concept, which does not imply so simply to adapt what is existing with the complements offered today by the market in this same area. That only by doing that collaboration, we will take the leap in the industry to operate sustainably in the following decades. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for your presentation, also for the challenge that you are showing us.
A lot of questions from our audience, But we're going to start first with one from our partner here, Carlos.
Okay, thank you, Gabriela, and thank you very much, Gavin and Miguel, for your wonderful presentations and introducing us into a new era of construction that has to be with sustainability. My first question is going for Gavin, and it has to do with how in the UK or in Mace did you live the transition between the pre-era of sustainability, or how do you make this cultural transformation on the staff, on people, on the value chain that starts on design and ends on the users? If you can give us a broad idea on how you make these changes, thinking we are in Chile, or most of the companies in Chile are going behind what you're doing in Mace and UK.
Certainly, thank you for that. So Mace has always been a company that was set up to challenge the norms, to change things, to shake things up, and to always do things a bit differently to try and improve the market. So this for us became the natural next step, just looking at the industry, that it's something important that we can't ignore and we can't continue with the business as usual. So it's something we've been working on for a long time now. I think our first sustainability initiative started back in like 2010, 2012, looking at where our materials are coming from and how we're managing our waste. And it's initially probably came more through requests from clients for those additional services. But once we saw the benefits from it, we really decided to drive forward with it through all our different parts of the business and through all our projects. So we just always try to think the idea of looking forward and what's the next big trend that's going to be driving the market, and we've always tried to keep ahead of that or keep pace with it and try and innovate and keep changing. Because as soon as you stop innovating and stop trying to improve your processes, that's when your business just stops. So that's part of the basic we've always tried to push for, is just continual improvement and just trying to pull everyone along with us. So we've always been engaging with our design teams, trying to question them on their basic assumptions, working with all our suppliers. So most of our suppliers, at least our tier 1 suppliers, we require them to sign up with CChC and to have done their own carbon assessment for themselves. So, and also then trying to think about our clients as well and trying to get them to think beyond just their immediate goals for the project and trying to think of a larger picture as well and try and be all encompassing in everything as well. So we're trying to influence everyone wherever we can and just move the industry forward.
Thank you for that, Gavin. You have a follow-up question?
Yeah, thank you very much, Gavin. Maybe also has to do on the decision of the company or looking what is the demand of people on, well, how the wonderful examples you made on measure on the platform on how to deal with this, diminish the emissions or impacts regarding to sustainability. My next question is now going to Miguel. Thank you, Miguel, for your presentation. And you mentioned, well, first of all, Chile is recognized as one of the 18 most countries impacted by climate change. And of course, what are we looking in the press, on sites or people or everywhere in the farms is the scarcity of less amount of water to use. You mentioned about adapt and changes and start reducing the leak of or on buildings or in sites. What about the reuse or reutilization of water or on site or on buildings? What can you tell us about that? Not only to diminish the leaks, but also to be efficient on reuse. Can you give us some a view on that?
Yes, totally. Basically, a complex problem needs a multidisciplinary approach for that. So one of the views is about how to recognize where we are not the most efficient in our process. That is one road to go about the inefficiency in our process. On the other side, we have how can we reuse all this wastewater that is able to use after a process. And both of them work perfect in a perfect synergy. For example, in the UK, they have different companies that work on the in the use of water, detecting how we use it in our different processes with the clean water. And on the other side, how can we, different companies, how can we reuse all this gray water that we call here, for example, for parks, or to reintroduce it to the same system that our company needs. So both approaches are necessary, are crucial to understand how we can how can we cope with this lack of water in the present and of course in the future.
Thank you for that, Miguel. We have another question from our audience, which is for both of you. Do you have any examples or cases of projects in the UK where there have been an efficient use of water? Let's start with you, Gavin.
Certainly, yes. A number of projects now are, even during the construction stage, looking to minimize the amount of water they're using. So a lot of captured rainwater and excavation water has been used on site for washing or vehicle cleaning. A number of sites are collecting rainwater and in fact filtering it and cleaning it up themselves to be used in showers or even to be used on sites for irrigation purposes. And the main thing that's being driven overall is just a pure reduction in the amount of water used. Once the reduction has gone as far as possible, then it's starting to look at, okay, all our wastewater, our grey water, our black water, what can we do with that? And it's certainly an ongoing process because the UK does sometimes run into water shortages. You wouldn't believe it if you sort of believe the weather. You think it's always wet and rainy here, but sometimes it does get hot and dry, and that is becoming more of a problem for us now.
Thank you for that, Gavin. Miguel, do you have some other examples?
Yes, there is a very interesting one that when I was living there, I read about the Sainsbury, that is a supermarket, a big supermarket company, yeah. And they are working with a campaign called Zero Water, and basically they are using different systems to manage the use of their water, to reduce the use of water in their own system. And with the difference, the minimum amount they had to continue operating, they were looking in the ecosystem that surrounded their branch to go for that water to be safe in another agent of that ecosystem. For example, schools or some local football teams or any other infrastructure that use water. So basically, if they had 100 liters, let's put a number, and they realized that they can operate with just 60, they went to look for the 60 liters in the ecosystem around the area and save that 60 liters. So they can say that they save 100% of their previous use of water. That was a very interesting project I saw in the UK.
Thank you for that, Miguel. Carlos has another question.
Thank you, Miguel. I got a new question for Gavin that has to do with, or if you can give us any example. I'm sure you have in the UK. You are much used to refurbish or to reuse existing infrastructure. That, of course, has a big impact in low emissions because you don't need the energy to produce new materials, because you can reuse materials on the site, and also because you don't put all the waste of demolition, the waste of putting down a building. What can you say us about that in your examples or your view from the UK?
Well, absolutely, yes. The most efficient building is the one that's already there, and trying to use those resources as much as possible. So we do have a project redevelopment in London of the Battersea Power Station. So this was a coal-fired power station built, I think, back in the 50s or 60s. It got shut down 25 years ago, and was basically an industrial site that no one was using right in the center of London. We've now been involved with redeveloping that site into office facilities, retail, residential complexes, and all around the original structure of the power station and its sort of service buildings, and also trying to protect the original look of the building, because it became quite a landmark in the city. So it's also heritage protected. So that's one of the things that we do encounter a fair amount, is a lot of buildings are heritage protected in the UK. So it's trying to reuse those buildings and bring them up to modern standards and for modern uses.
Thank you very much, Gavin. And now going to Miguel, a question regarding to culture, or to how you or you in Kemenco, or probably you had to do with this, to teach people or the staff of who was working, or the user demands on this change of culture. I'll give you two examples. You can wash your teeth and keep the water open, or in the garden you put the tub running water. And what about that? Because you talk a lot about leaks, or the loss of water, but also I think it's a big change of culture on the user demand, on how we use, or we demand the use of water. What can you give us a view on that?
Well, that is a huge question, a very interesting question, because first of all, one difference between the British culture and Chilean culture is be aware about efficient of any resource. So the first step to realize about that is be able to measure about how you're using your resource, any resource, in this case, water, for example. That is one difference. The second one is how we value a resource in a broader sense of what it means for our activity. As Gavin just said, when they think about a project, they think about their own company, the suppliers, the users, clients, and so on. In our case, one of a new approach we need is to open the view to understand that our industry is not just what we do, is what the client needs, is what the system needs, is how my industry talks with the different players of the ecosystem. Because in the end, we are all in the same ship sailing in the ocean. So we need to cooperate more. That is another big difference I realized about the British culture and Chilean culture. We need more cooperation. We need to be more open to listen and to try to it's like life itself is trial and error. We need more of that, and try to understand that this is for all of us. This is not just our industry. If again, the example of the river Aconcagua, if somebody take out the water, it totally affects our industry. So we need to be more open to understand how everything works around us and how that impacts our industry.
And for Gavin, in your experience, how can you create awareness to tackle these challenges that Miguel was just talking about?
So the challenge always with awareness is just education. It's trying to educate people as to what their impacts are and what impacts they can have on others, and just trying to get people to think of, as Miguel was saying, of the bigger picture, that everything does link together. We all have impacts on not just the site we work on, but on the community that surrounds our sites. So it's also been important to engage with those as well and try and show them what we're doing to try and be better contractors or better developers. And it's also then taking that education to the clients as well and through all the whole supply chain. So I think as soon as people are aware of what the problems are and you've educated them as to the issues, they're usually more than willing to try and help you on that journey.
Thank you for that, Gavin. And we have a specific question for you. You talked about the SEM-free initiative during your presentation. What alternative products are you using on construction sites when you talk about alternatives to concrete?
So first, with any project is obviously concrete is a very carbon intensive product. A lot of energy goes into manufacturing it. So the target is trying to get rid of the cement content as low as possible, but also first off, design for the minimum use of concrete. Only use it where you really have to. You can use other materials instead, like mass timber construction. But replacing the cement in the concrete mix, we've worked with a company that's developed sort of a mix of alkali activated sort of cement replacement products that act as binders. So it's mostly based on ground granulated blast furnace slag and pulverized fly ash products. So products along those lines that are sort of mixed together to create basically a cement equivalent binder for the aggregates.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Gavin. And we have a broad question for you. Are those sustainability standards that you talked about well defined and shared by all of the actors of the industry?
So many of them are, yes. In different regions will have their own different standards, but quite a few of them are internationally recognized, especially like FSC. It's quite a common one that gets used in many markets. I know from my experience also back in South Africa, it was the same standard we used there. It gets used in North America and all across Europe. I have encountered also in Latin America as well. So there are standards that are used everywhere, but in most cases, you probably will be able to find an equivalent.
Thank you for that, Gavin. We have another question for Miguel. Do you have any successful cases in Chile where water has been used in an efficient way on construction sites?
Well, for the moment, as I was mentioning on the presentation, we started the prototype this year with the company, and we realized that we have the same percentage of inefficiency that the experience in the UK, that is roughly 50–60%, in a previous infrastructure that is already in use. We are looking now for partnerships in construction, but in the phase of construction, to be introduced this kind of tools in the process to measure about the process in construction, and afterward the user experience with the tool. So now we are dealing with that situation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Miguel. And we have another question for you. Do you think that the problems related to the shortage of water are regulatory? I mean, when we talk about the shortage of water, we usually also talk about water rights. Do you think that these have a negative impact?
Sorry if I oh, okay. It's not like in the presentation. There was a quote of the expert from Israel. There is a lot about the right about water, but not the obligation we have about to make an efficient use of that. For sure, there is something about the regulation, because one of the problems that Chile have is we have so many agents in the ecosystem that have some kind of decision about water that in the end make it unpracticable. It's different to manage with so many people around that. That is for sure one problem. But in the end, this is not about, again, the how much or less right we have about use the water. Is in the end, if we don't have water, you have right over nothing. So we need to be awareness about that reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you, Miguel. Now, a question for Gavin. It's from the audience. It says, and it's related to what we've been talking before. And if to build in a sustainable way, it only has positive impacts, not only in medio ambiente, environment,
yeah.
but also in social and positive impacts, and of course economic. Why is this not broadly used, or why don't people use it as much as the impacts show us? What can you say about that?
Okay, if I've understood correctly, then I mean, we've started to measure, and it's also becoming a measure increasingly. A number of the different cities you work in, is they all want us to measure the social value created by our projects. So that is slowly becoming a metric that's sort of part of it. But the environmental impact was always difficult to quantify. It was always difficult to put a number to it. So we do have newer tools now that are able to put numbers to certain interventions and savings. And as soon as you translate it into a currency value, then a lot of councils and people that are involved then understand it far better. If they can see a number added to it, then they can sort of see it as something that needs action taken upon. So that's been one of the challenges, to try and make the sustainability impacts more visible in a sense that can be understood by the different players. I hope I've sort of got the gist of that right for you.
Yeah, very good, very good. Thank you very much, Gavin. And now, also from the audience to Miguel, do you have well, first, of course, all what we've been talking about, this culture change, the measurements or the impacts to get the impacts. What about also another view or another important dimension is regulation? I don't know if you have any more, or do you have some information on the new law of gray waters for the real estate industry, and what is going to happen if it's going to be approved soon or required for buildings? Do you any information you can give us, or view on this new law?
Well, regarding that, I probably have the same information that people manage. That is about that there is a project about the gray water, and unfortunately, there's no specific date for when we have that law to be mandatory. For sure, that is something that add to the market and to go in the road to solve part of the problem. Again, it's a complex problem, so everything adds part of the solution. But in the end, what I think is this is going to be mandatory at some point, the same that the rise in tariff, for example, because there is we already have the problem, and unfortunately there are not much actions about that. We need more infrastructure to be able to save water when we have a lot of rain, because climate change is about extreme weather. So there is a lot to do about that, and every action for sure that add to part of the problem.
Thank you for that, Miguel. We have another question for you both. This is our third session from this e-mission about sustainability. And all of the speakers have been talking about the positive impacts in improving sustainability in certification processes or on site, like you both do. If there are only positive things said about sustainability, why aren't we doing more? Why are we not doing more? Gavin, let's start with you.
I think there's historically been a perception that it's always more difficult or it's always more costly. And I think initially for a number of initiatives for certain projects, maybe that was the case. But as the industry has developed more and more, those have just become part of the normal way of doing things. And those additional costs were absorbed or disappeared in the process as everyone got up to speed. So again, it's still down to the perception. People still think it's difficult. They still think it's more expensive, when in reality, sometimes it can result in a saving overall for a project over its lifetime.
Thank you for that, Gavin. Miguel, do you have any thoughts about this?
Well, yeah, I agree with Gavin. It's about, we need to shift the paradigm about the myth of this is more expensive, or this, we need to change our whole industry because of this new regulation or this new view about sustainability. We need to try it, basically. We need to try it, we need to measure, we need to realize about the benefit that we have. Why not everybody do it? Just because the change of the mindset, and sometimes we're so on the daily routine solving problems that we don't sit to think about the future and to think how the same thing we're doing with small changing we can make a big difference. It's just about a change of the mindset and culture, obviously.
Yeah. And related to that, Miguel, during your presentation, you showed us a slide where it said that sustainable companies have higher returns than the ones that do not. How would you measure that? I mean, do they have a bigger value, or can they charge more? How do you measure those higher returns?
Well, basically, the higher returns are the same way to measure all the normal companies. This is about money. In the end, it's financial. How they have more return? For example, one simple example: if you are more efficient, you are saving money. It's just about that. If you are more efficient, you are saving resources. You are saving some time. Human labor, when you put a digital process in your company and you are able to work in a different way, more efficient, and in the end you finish your project in less time than previously, and you are saving money. It's just about efficiency.
Gavin, do you have any thoughts about that? Do you think that sustainable companies perform better than the ones that are not?
Absolutely, I agree with Miguel totally. The more efficient you are in your process and resources, you can generate a huge amount of savings for yourself. If you are more effective in your work and have less rework and higher quality, that's materials and time. You don't have to go back and fix or change things. Using less energy saves you. Using more efficient equipment saves you money in operation costs and in maintenance. So anything you can do that goes along with sustainability also helps you be more efficient, and that just makes you also a more desirable person to work with as well. So more people will be beating down your door to come have you do work for them. And that's also where part of driving the business as well, and where you will get more business and be more profitable, so that people will be coming to you and your services will be in demand.
And related to that, we have another question about costs, because there's some, or there's this thought that being more sustainable has a higher cost, that doing the things that we're used to do the traditional way. How have you been able to absorb those higher costs?
So as we've been speaking already, sometimes those high costs are there. I know historically for certain green building certifications, for most projects, you're looking at a uplift in cost of anywhere from 1 to 4% on average. If you're going really high tech, you can go a bit higher than that. But more often than not, because the design tends to be much more intensive, that design period is longer, you've found more synergies and efficiencies in your design process and made your building work better. So you can make a lot of savings in the design, in the processes, the materials selected, that by the time you get to the end of the project, you've not really realized that many additional costs. From a contractor's point of view, is that all these things on site do also save you money.
Mm. And what advice would you give small companies that are just starting on this sustainability path?
Well, I think it's the same for all companies. We all need to pivot and start moving in the same direction towards being more sustainable and looking at our processes, looking at all the assumptions that we always held to be true and questioning them, and just trying to slowly move our processes in the right direction, because it's better that we start heading that way now, because further down the line, we're all going to be forced to go that way, at which point it'd be far more expensive. So the quicker the change is implemented now, the more time we have to get up to speed with it, and the less it'll cost in the long run to get everything right.
Thank you for that, Gavin.
Thank you, Gavin. And question, keeping on you, Gavin. You mentioned on one of your slides, and you've been talking also Miguel, about well, of course, reduces of cost. A big impact in cost has to do with hand labor. You mentioned that, well, one of the mega trends of construction's future, we are not being attractive enough to bring all the hand labor all the new infrastructure we'll need. How do you relate this with sustainability in terms of lower emissions, what can we, if you can give us also a view on prefabs, on reduce or increase productivity regarding not only with design, but to ensemble on site in a more efficient way, and dealing with this lack of infrastructure and connecting this with sustainability or lower emissions?
Absolutely. It's something we've been working on for a while now, is to make the construction industry more of a factory mass production type process. So every building is usually bespoke, made on site, no two are alike. It's always a unique project every single time. The more we can standardize our processes and materials, the more quality and better efficiency we can get out of it. So if we move everything to a factory setting and create everything in modules, we're creating the same thing again and again and building a structure up in blocks. So that also, we reduce the amount of waste that you generate while being on site, because now it's all in factory setting, so you're much more efficient, it's much cleaner, it goes much quicker. So moving the industry to more of a production process as opposed to a bespoke one-off process is something that's going to allow us to use our resources much more efficiently. And through that, we'll realize savings economically and also for the environment as well, and sustainability.
Thank you. Completely agree. And now for Miguel, we've been talking on experience on a construction site or to reuse the use of water, but part of construction is infrastructure, and part of the demand or the biggest demand on water is for, I understand, for agriculture. The human use is of course goes first, but it's a lower part of demand. Do you have any? Can you give us any view or advice on what has, because you mentioned the example of the scarcity of water in the river Aconcagua, and that is cutting or might cut water for production, but production also is part of human use, because we need agriculture to feed ourselves. We need food. What can you give us about this, the better use of water in agriculture, dealing with infrastructure or more efficient ways with infrastructure to use water?
Well, that is part of the dilemma. It's very interesting because this is like the COVID situation. You save lives, but how those humans feed themselves because they cannot work. You know, it's part of the problem you produce in the economic in a country. This is the same situation. If you have priority for humans being, okay, then how, and not for the industry, then you have a gap you need to solve because you have a problem in the economy. And that is why this is so interesting. And this is part of the culture and the mindset, because we need to realize that in the end, everything is intertwined, everything is connected. So if we only say to agriculture, okay, you use the 60, 70% of water, so you need to do something. Well, we in the industry use 30%, 20%, which is a huge amount of water that eventually could make us continue producing for our own industry. So this is cooperation. Again, we need to save water in the different with the different players of this ecosystem. Agriculture is doing part of the work because now, well, probably most of people know that we in the construction industry are in the lowest level of innovation with agriculture, but now we are basically in the same level, and agriculture is innovating much more than we are doing in construction industry. So who knows that probably in a close future, construction is going to be the problem. Who knows, or industry in the broader terms. So the message is we need to be aware about this situation and work in the power we have in the industry we belong. That is what we should do, according to my view.
Thank you for that, Miguel. We still have a lot of questions, but we have little time and we have to be efficient about time as well in this mission. So we have a last question for you both, which we've been making through the other sessions. When would you consider that a company is truly sustainable? Let's start with you, Gavin.
So I think the point where you measure a company as being truly sustainable is the point at where it starts generating more benefit for the community and for the environment which it works in than what it's taking out to operate. I think that's the point we all need to get to. We all need to be having a net positive effect on the environment we work on, the people we work with, and the resources that we're using.
That's interesting. Miguel, do you have some thoughts about this?
I have a similar view. Sustainable is not about just green or trees. You know, sometimes this is a kind of a cartoon about that. Sustainability is about what we're doing in our own industry that allow us to project a future with the same process we are doing right now. So everything is about efficiency and to be able to use in a better way resources. That for me is about sustainability in time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Miguel. And with this, we're starting to close our Q&A. Miguel, Gavin, thank you so much for joining us, for your expositions, for your thoughts, for all the challenges that you said we have in this country. And it's been really useful to know about the work you're doing in the UK. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you for the invitation.
I'm going to switch to Spanish now. Ahora nos estamos comenzando a acercar al final de esta.
Now we move towards the end of this session, but before that, we want to ask you to enter once again to Menti, because I've seen that you have been very active, and in general terms, how would you evaluate the session? This has been a great help for us because with this feedback, we've been able to improve our meetings, and we are going to be able to improve on the following session. Finally, as a closure, please let us know the learnings you take about this day, a concept, a main idea, and we're going to continue reviewing this. So I want to ask you, Carlo, with what main idea do you is something that you take home on sustainability during the process? Well, one of the learnings that I keep us from the construction industry have been measuring 4 additional variables, which is price, safety, quality, and the time. But in this new era, and due to the higher social awareness of the need of including sustainability, which is a balance between economic growth in the environmental and social areas, is going to be key to associate or include it not only to our everyday life, but also to our activity. This is one of the first learnings we have, which is key for this. Well, to educate, measure, it is to continue viewing specific actions. And so it's a great challenge that has been said a lot, and it is key to collaborate. All these aspects are interrelated with each other, and the idea is that to advance in this aspect, collaboration and connections is fundamental. So this is what I keep. Also, the audience agrees that to measure today is fundamental. Understanding and measuring the consumption is a concept that repeats itself constantly. So also in the issue that's key to include sustainability, but without social stability, there is not sustainability for the projects. And this is also a very important issue on this week. Totally, in the end, the main focus or final focus is people. And people is going to be affected with, of course, obviously we have less environmental impact if we incorporate sustainability to the metrics. So this is what we should have as a final goal in our industry. Okay, well, it is 10:32 now, and we need to say goodbye. Thank you very much for being with us. So having connected, and we hope that this has been a great activity and you have learned a lot. And we will remind you that we'll meet again this Thursday in the last session at 9 a.m. We're going to begin talking on sustainability, the core business, and environment management. Please have a great beginning of the week. We're still on a Tuesday, and we will reconvene on Thursday.